Hello and welcome back to CrossFit Harrow's podcast. This is episode 57 and our guest today, a lot of you would have seen our guest over social media, and now we are putting a face to a name. Sona is joining us from Sona's Food Journal, which you see us post quite regularly about, who we work with on our social media, who is a very active member. And Sona, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
First question, as always, that goes out to everyone, is what brought you to CrossFit Harrow?
It's quite a long story. If you want the very short answer, it was a little bit of weight. But if I'm honest, as a young person, I was actually always quite sporty. When you're in school, these things come naturally to you. You're part of school. And I grew up in Kenya, so it was quite outdoorsy. As I grew up, I moved here to study, did a bit of swimming and other things that I enjoyed, but quite sporadically. And then started working, and I became one of those people, which I promised myself I would never do. I paid for a gym when I started working, and I never actually ended up going for about 6 months. And I thought, well, I can't be doing that. So I cancelled the membership and decided, I must have gone maybe once or twice, but decided it wasn't for me and just left it at that. And then as you do, life just carries on, and sort of you do the normal things that life expects of you. I mean, I got married after I started working, and the normal progression from that is you then think about having children and all of that. And my husband and I, before I go into that, my husband and I always sort of joked with each other that we'd never let each other get put on weight in some ways. But I think what we were trying to say to each other was we'd never let each other get unhealthy or unfit. It wasn't just about the weight, it was what that weight meant to us.
Okay.
And we said we'd call each other out if we saw that happening, because I come from a family of foodies, hence the Food Journal, and we love eating. And through life, you don't realize where that sort of catches up with you. And something my dad always told me as well, that the quantity I ate as what you normally see as girls eat, sometimes they eat a bit less, but I was eating quite a lot. And I enjoyed it. It wasn't that I wasn't enjoying it, I just enjoyed eating. It was almost like a never-ending thing. So he did tell me once, he sat me down and we were just having a chat, and he said, Sona, don't forget, it's good to eat, but just make sure that you look after yourself as well. And at that time I was just like, it's fine. But then eventually, with life happening, I may not have noticed it, and over time I may have started putting on here, there. You start doing jobs where you're sitting down more. And then came a time in my life where I think my husband and I had gone through quite a difficult stage. We had tried to have children, and I'd gone through a series of miscarriages, and we quickly realized that that wasn't going to happen for us. And whilst I was outwardly okay, my body had taken quite a big knock.
Yeah.
And I think I went through a phase of thinking I was annoyed with my own body, because I'd always been quite a sporty person, or ate well. Well, I think I ate well, but never really sort of ate badly. Mm-hmm. So I never really expected that, because you don't go through life waiting for disappointments. And then sort of it knocked me for 6. And I realized that I was angry. Well, I was happy, but I was quite angry at my own body for letting me down in that way. But
also what life had thrown at you.
Exactly. So, and I had a brilliant support system. My husband's amazing. He was my rock, and I couldn't have done everything. I mean, we went through it together. I mean, like they say, it's not just about you, it is about your husband as well. But at the end of the day, it was my body that was taking that knock. And we were all, as a family, we pulled together and we were great. And my friends were amazing. But what it did make me realize that life had suddenly changed. We realized that it wasn't going to happen for us. And we sort of took that in our stride in some way and said, right, okay, you sort of change your mindset, and you change how you see what your life is, or rather you stop planning for certain things. And either way, I did feel sort of, and at that sort of very similar sort of time when we were going through that, my whole team at where I was working, we got made redundant.
Okay.
And whilst that's not always a bad thing, for me it came at a good time. I needed a bit of a break anyway.
Tends to provide a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, I have learnt something out of this, is that things happen for a reason. And even where I was working, they were so supportive because everyone had seen me gone through this because it was quite an open thing. So I remember thinking at that point, right, I wasn't working. Clearly I'd been through this. My body had felt this horrible shock. And I was annoyed that I was feeling myself that I never thought my body would let me down. And
so through certain stages of people's lives, it almost feels like you're invincible to a lot of...
I wouldn't say I was feeling invincible. I just, you don't think that that's going to happen to you.
Yeah. And that's what I mean, is like you just feel like the things that the negativity, like it wouldn't happen to me, or I'm fit enough to do this, I'm healthy enough to do that. Yeah.
And I mean, I was still fit and healthy, don't get me wrong. There was nothing really wrong. It was just obviously through the process we realized some things, and then we just sort of said that was that. And obviously I'd stopped working very shortly after that happened, and through my whole working career I'd been from going again very active to sitting at a desk. And whilst I loved what I did, and like I said, coming back to what I'd said to my husband, that we'd always said that we'd make sure we keep each other fit, I think it came to a point where I was both feeling like, right, I needed to achieve something, but also I wanted to feel like my body was stronger than that, and that it didn't have to be about that. I had put on a bit of
something
weight.
To empower you.
Exactly. I needed to feel like I was going to be okay. And I remember we were on a car journey going to see my sister, and we were just talking. We'd always heard about CrossFit, and I always had this really scary perception of CrossFit because it's what you see. We'd watched a lot of Netflix things about CrossFit, and you see people, and I'd never done. I mean, I paid for a gym, didn't go there. But I sort of we talked about CrossFit a little while, and it kind of phased off. Didn't really do anything about it, and then the whole thing about me wanting to do something again came up, and so my husband was like, on that journey, he was just Googling CrossFit gyms, and ended up finding something here. And I said, no, I'm never going to enjoy that. That's not me at all. I hate gyms. It's not what I do.
And actually, your first workout was probably the worst one ever for you, right?
Yeah.
It was pissing down with rain, is that right? Or dark?
I don't remember if it was raining. It was dark.
There was a long run in that.
And that's something that I'm actually really happy about, because I started at a time where a lot of people start things in the summer or 1st of January. I started almost on my birthday, if not on my birthday, at a time where it was dark, horrible, Christmas time, where I'm more of a sun person. I need the sun out, as with a lot of people. So yeah, I mean, just coming back. So I had started to put on a little bit of weight, and I came in for a trial session on the back of that because we booked it. I was petrified. I was absolutely petrified of what was going to happen. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be lifting weights. I can't do this. And I walked in. I remember seeing you in that little gym that was the second gym.
It was the second one,
It was the second gym.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember you sitting outside watching everyone do their workout who were finishing. And I remember you saying to me, so Sona, how are you feeling today? And first of all, it was nighttime. I was ready to switch off by this point. I was like, I'm tired, I'm okay, but I'm a bit scared. And you said, right, what are you scared of? I said, I'm scared of running. You said, good, we're running today. And
I distinctly remember that, actually.
I hope. Well, the thing is, at that moment, I didn't know what to think, because, I mean, okay, you think...
I would have laughed that off, right, as a joke, yeah?
We were we weren't laughing. But I think for me, it was more, I'd got to the stage in my life, I couldn't run 10 minutes without getting out of breath. So that really, like, the way you said it, I was still thinking this whole CrossFit perception of really big weights. And I was thinking, oh, he's saying we're running today. So
in your case, you've been pretty much thrown into a deep end, of you overcoming one of your biggest fears straight away.
Yeah, but I think I've got okay with that as I've grown up, because I've always, I mean, even with work and whatnot, I've always done lots of different things. And the one thing I found is that I've always started from scratch, whatever I've done. And that's been really good for me, because I think we've talked about this before, where we talk about delegation and all those things, but I like doing things from the start.
Learning the process,
and doing all of that. And so this was a bit like that, because I felt like I was starting from scratch. Having said that, when I walked in, we did our first session, and I vowed never to come back. I had decided, because we ran quite a lot that day.
Yeah, I think there was quite a lot of running.
I can't remember how much, but we did run quite a lot that day.
Well, it would have been at least
3 times.
Yeah, it would have been at least 2.5 miles, I think.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah.
With other stuff in between.
It was actually a long work. It was a very long work.
It was
like 20,
long.
30 minutes.
And bless whoever I was following that day, and I remember who it was. She was really sweet. She must have had to run a bit slower for me, because I was struggling. Yeah, okay. She is. I did a workout with her not long ago, but so I mean, bless her. She obviously, because I didn't know the route, whatever. But at the end of the session, you asked me, so how did you find that? I said, yeah, fine. And I walked out the gym. I distinctly remember sitting in the car.
On the phone to Tom.
I got on the phone with Tom, my husband, and saying, I was bawling it. I was in tears. And I said, I'm never coming back here again. If I come back here again, actually, before I walked out the gym, you did say to me, how did you feel? So I said, oh, not so good. And then you said, just come back in. Just walk back into the gym, and that's all you need to do. And so that was my trial session, whether I wanted to do this. And so the day I came back in was my birthday. That was my official, right, I'm going to do this.
That was your start day.
That was my start day. And when I started, it was quite sporadic. I wasn't doing it quite so often, because I think it took me a bit of time to recover through the movements.
But along the way, like, there was a lot of things that, got you to that point that you were overcoming.
Yeah, so I was glad I came back, because I don't
Well, here you are a few years later.
It's 2.5 years now. So yeah.
Yeah. Let's go back to you grew up in Kenya.
Yeah.
So at what age did you come over to England?
16.
Okay.
I was here when I was 16. I had decided to not do my A-levels, but I decided to pursue a degree in design. So I came here to do a small foundation course in design, and then I went on to doing university in advertising, which I really thoroughly enjoyed. But again, that was a learning curve at 16. I mean, at that time, you don't think about it.
Did you come here alone?
Yeah. So I stayed alone in halls, as you do. But I think what you don't realize, again, maybe I was a little bit mature, as some people are. But now when I think about it, I think, oh my God, I was 16.
And if you look back, like, you think at 16, you was like, what the fuck did we know, like, at 16?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not one of those people to look back and think, would I have done this again? Would I have done that again? But I just think, like I said, I do believe things happen for a reason. And I came here and I learned a lot, even during that time, about myself. And
Well, you had to. You were on your own.
Yeah, I was on my own. And I think I embraced it. And I think that's one thing I've always done, is whatever I've thrown myself into, I have, whether it's a new job or I've just kind of thrown myself at it. And I've accepted failures as I've gone along. And when I say failures, I mean things you learn and then do them better the next time. Because I don't like to think of them as failures as such.
As a lesson more.
They're lessons. So yeah.
And what about like the culture change and stuff? Like how did you find that? Like obviously climate as well was a big thing.
Climate was the biggest one for me, because
that can be quite hard to settle.
Yeah, but having said that, when you were 16, you kind of you're in that phase where you're going out with your friends, and yes, you're there to learn and study and all of that, but you're also surrounded. So there were a lot of people who were in the same situation as I was. So I did make a lot of friends. There were a lot of people who also come from Kenya, not people that I knew, but I mean, and that kind of helped a little bit. So, but in terms of the culture change, it wasn't that bad. I mean, I've had quite an open upbringing in that way. we've always traveled. We were lucky enough to travel as a family. So I'd been to England before.
Oh, okay.
And so it wasn't a complete
sudden change
for me. Obviously, living somewhere and having a holiday somewhere is very, very different, and having to look after yourself. But again, this was the other thing. I mean, simple things like I bonded with people over food because it's something we all enjoyed.
And the food thing started young, right?
I mean, the food things. I mean, I come from a family of foodies. We all love our food. Whichever way you look at it, we've always been a family of foodies. And not just my immediate family, my extended family, all of us. When we come together, it's always been through meals, as with a lot of families. But I think, and it's not even about, I think for us, it was more about cooking the food ourselves. So when we went out, it wasn't about going out to a restaurant necessarily. It was somewhere we used to go. It was an old rundown tennis court. And my dad would always cook, and it would always be one person in the family who would cook, and a lot of the times it would my dad be the one cooking. And also we were brought up as a vegetarian household, so mum, we used to live with my gran, and I think that made me appreciate. I'm actually quite thankful for that, because it made me appreciate the value of eating fresh veg and fruit. And mum was always sort of,
that's so underrated as well.
Yeah, so I mean, vegetarianism has always been a part of my life. It's not, I do eat a lot of vegetarian food, but I do love eating a little bit of seafood and all these things. So coming from a family of foodies, we always sort of went out, and the idea of cooking wasn't fancy. It was about big, delicious meals, even though what you see on the page is not the same all the time.
So you come over from Kenya at 16, you're on your own, you've done the degree in design, and then that led you to what pathway?
So initially I found it quite tough to find a job, so I ended up working in retail for quite a while, but again worked my way up through that, and somehow then jumped from retail to working for a financial institution, and again completely started from scratch. But it was something I wanted to do because the opportunity came my way. It was, at the end of the day, it was progress. Whichever way I looked at it, learning something new is never going to be a step back. So I started to do that. And even within that financial institution, I sort of changed roles and did different things. And I'd always sort of, whether it was in retail or later, I'd always sort of ended up managing a team, which I really enjoyed doing. That taught me a lot, because working with people, as I'm sure you know, it's not always easy.
Working with people can be difficult.
Yeah, in a nice way. I think it's,
not necessarily talking about employees, talking about just people.
You have to be mindful of everyone's strengths and weaknesses. You've got to.
But even dealing with human
understand.
interaction also.
Yeah. But I think, so I never envisaged doing that, but I actually really enjoyed it. And I actually enjoyed learning something that I never thought I'd do. But so that was.
And then along that was fitness, like, was it there? Was it in the back of your head?
It was very, very, so as time went by, I knew there's always this thing of, yes, I want to keep fit. So you might go for a swim one day. You might do a little bit of sport one day and feel like you're really doing something. But there was never a routine. Yeah. There was never something I felt like I was really getting stuck into.
One thing growing up in Kenya was there like an image, here within the fitness industry, it can be like there's a certain image that a woman has to look like. There's certain messages that get sent out through. Yeah. Obviously, social media wasn't as big, if not even was around. But in the sense that, like, was there any pressure growing up to be a certain way or anything like that?
Not really. I think, because where we were, a lot of us, we were encouraged to do sports. We were encouraged to be outside and do both your academia as well as sports. It was, I think, it never really, as part of my family and part of my sort of little circle, it never was a real issue, because I think all of us were generally quite active. And we never really talked about doing sports. We loved the idea of it, so we loved sort of going to the beach, having a swim and doing, but it was never, I think because it was part of our school curriculum, it never really it never really forced us to think about it outside of it. It just became part of who we were. And I think that made a big difference, because you're taking the thought out of it. Because a lot of times, I think when you go to school, you have to actively make sure you take part in those things. But this was actually part of our everyday.
Wow, okay. Interesting. I won't get too much into it, but wanted to ask with regards to, there's been quite a few challenges in life. With regards to knowing that the time came when you couldn't have children, I'm sure there's a lot of listeners waiting for me to ask, and probably resonate. There's probably a lot of people that, without realising, have been in a similar position. Was everything like put to one side? Obviously, that was the biggest thing going on. How did you deal with that? What was has there been side effects in terms of how it's made you feel?
At the time, I mean, I wouldn't say there was things put aside. It was, I think sometimes when you're going through something, and one thing I've always learned is your problems are always going to feel the worst because they're your own.
Yeah. That's very accurate, actually.
I don't know who said that to me once, but it's always stuck with me. And I think it's always made me mindful of how I sort of deal with other people as well, because you don't know what someone else is going through. Luckily, when I was going through it at work, I mean, they were all so lovely to me because they knew. I mean, you could see, because a lot of times people don't get to speak about it.
Yeah, and maybe some people feel like they're not comfortable speaking about it, or they don't want to.
But I think with mine, because of the sort of the situation I was in, it was quite open.
But also, you mentioned earlier that you had a very good support network around you at the time.
Yeah, and I think that was the biggest thing for me. But I think also when you're going through it, everyone deals with it differently, and I can't comment on how you should feel or whatever, but I know that I dealt with it better than I thought I would. Because I kind of just, physically it took me a bit of time to recover, but I kind of just carried on. Whether it was work, whether it was just day-to-day life, you just carry on, don't you? And you don't want that to stop you, because
I think one of the biggest things is the acceptance of
I mean, I had accepted it, and I think because it wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a process. It happened over a long period of time. So I'd had a bit of time to understand what was going on. It was a constant conversation in terms of when it happened. You know how to deal with things, but there was never really a plan as to how it was going to be dealt with. But when it happened and it was decided and that was it, I kind of just said, okay, well, but I think it was I think outwardly, many people just deal with it because you've got to carry on with life, because if you don't, it can consume you.
Yeah, I was going to say it can consume you.
It can consume you. And so I think because I had my friends and family who were so supportive, I mean, sometimes people want to help you, but they don't know how. And
some can't,
And some can't. Yeah. And I think the thing that made it more difficult for all of them is that I think they'd always thought I was always the maternal one. And it was, so I think nobody saw it happening to me either. So, and a lot of people around me hadn't dealt with it, so they didn't know how. But you just kind of carry on. And I don't know what it was inside me that just said, there is a reason for this. And
did it give you fire in your belly to pursue things that you want,
it wasn't something specific, so it gave me, once it was all done and dusted, it wasn't something specific, but I just knew that wasn't going to be the end, and that wasn't going to be the end all of everything. Which
is admirable, because a lot of people would have been in a very dark place for a long period of time and may not and may have looked at it as the end.
Yeah, and it's very understandable, because you can be, but that's why I can't say enough how important it was for my husband to be there the way he was, my family. I mean, my parents weren't here because obviously they were in Kenya at the time. But I think my sister was here, and I mean, I couldn't have done it without all of them. My friends were sort of my really close friends who were there. you kind of just, they feel for you, but you get that strength from them, is that if they're being strong for you, then you do want to be strong. So
okay, so Sona's food journal.
Yeah.
The inspiration, obviously loving being around food.
Yeah.
It's always been in your family. So the name itself, where did that come from?
Well, the Instagram page was actually a result of a bit of COVID boredom. I was sitting at home.
Which gave a lot of people a lot of opportunities.
And I think a lot of people like myself decided to do it. There wasn't really a plan for what was going to happen with it. I just started a page and just to document any pretty plates. It doesn't have to be everything I ate, but just anything that I thought was photographable, as you.
Yeah, the photos are. They're almost like stock images that you.
Yeah, I mean, there is this thing that I'm very actively aware that people should be quite real as well. So, but it is the sort of food I like to eat.
Especially where you grew up. And
I do eat. There are routine things that I like to eat, but there are some things I like to photograph and just creative. And again, for me, it was a creative outlet. It just allowed me to explore another avenue, which I was starting from scratch in my head. I didn't really use social media much. I had a page on Instagram, but I didn't really use it. Yeah, I'd take a few photos on holiday and put them up as you do, but nothing
significant.
So I didn't know the workings of social media. I still don't know all of it.
That's a full-time job in itself. It requires so much attention, so much skill.
Yeah.
People really do have to have a knack. To nail it, you have to really have a knack for it.
I mean, someone once I don't know who, I was listening to a podcast and someone once called it, whilst everyone loves it, it can be a time suck. Instagram itself can be a time suck because you do get brought into this. And so when I first started it, I sort of was learning the ropes. And then I think as you do things, sometimes, whether it's start your own business or a new job, you kind of evolve as you go. You learn the job as you go. So
your vision although you might have a vision from the beginning, you kind of move in and out of it.
So I completely had a different vision when I started. Initially, there was no vision, but when I first started it, I thought that's what I want to do. That's fine. But slowly that's evolved as well. And I'm happy with the process. I think it was, and funny thing is, not long ago, I was listening to Jay Shetty's podcast, and there was one episode about perfection and what that means for people, and how, without going into too much, but just the idea of the end result means you're so focused on the end result, you forget to enjoy that process. And that's one thing I've started doing a lot more of. So sometimes when I think people are quieter on social media pages, you've got to remind yourself they're probably doing something in the background
to be able to then give you more later on.
So it's just that idea that I have to remind myself that it has to be an enjoyable process.
But that's, I think we've said it quite regularly recently, it's falling in love with that journey and not just think there's a destination, you get off there and that's it, you've ticked it all off and you've completed it.
But I think to be honest, I have managed to apply that because of what I've learned about myself in here. I know it sounds really one of those things that, I'm trying to make it sound better than it is, but it's the truth. I learned a lot about myself after I came in here and about how, because I walked in here and I was watching people who could do a lot and not that I'm still anywhere near the strongest nor the fittest person in here, but I came in here as definitely someone who couldn't even do the simplest of things like squat. But I had to be okay with knowing that there was a journey there was a process. And I mean, sometimes people have come up to me, go back to the running thing, a couple of people have said, "You run really fast." I was like, "No, I don't."
But someone else will always have a different perception.
And I remember I must have said that to someone when I first started. So
you'll always be walking through the doors of a CrossFit gym can at times be intimidating, or people can feel a certain way, but you will be someone else's success story along the way. You've said, "Oh my God, I want to be like that person." 6 months later, someone's turned around and said about you, "Oh, I want to be like that person," which is, and it's just that cycle.
Yeah.
So the inspiration, with the food, started young, obviously.
Yeah.
Now, where do you get your inspiration from? Do you put a lot of recipes together that you kind of just know the ingredients that will sit well?
So my inspiration comes from just trying different ingredients out. To when it comes to the creative, everyday recipes are just things that I've thrown together. I think I've told you this before, but I've never been a recipe person. I never measured ingredients.
Yeah.
I just kind of threw things together and they came together. The inspiration now just comes from whether it's going out to friends for a meal, not that that's happening much of right now, but generally just things you read, you look through recipe books, or you go to a supermarket and I might take a bit longer than a lot of people because
Ripped out a piece of paper out of the book, put it back.
not that bad, but yeah, so there's no real specific form of inspiration. I think books are a big thing because especially right now when you're not going out much or you're not getting to sort of go to other people's houses.
Yeah, have you resorted to like watching more programs on TV about
I've always
like chefs and
I remember so again, this was something that my family always used to love to do. We used to love to watch things like Ready Steady Cook.
I used to,
I used to love it, and I could still watch it now, in fact. But yeah, I don't watch them as much as I did back in the day, but I love things like there's documentaries on Netflix. Those are really inspiring. Chef's Table.
The documentary with Gordon, Gino, and the French.
I've not watched that one.
It's actually quite funny. You might like that actually.
Because
I think they go to Scotland, they go to Italy, they go to France, or there's an episode in there, and they go taste.
Traveling is another. What you're
saying.
Where
you taste different
traveling
foods.
Traveling it's one of the biggest inspirations I think anyone can have when it comes to whether it's just taking a break and coming back to doing what you love, or actually.
But finding the cultural food of where you're visiting.
Yeah, so I think that's a big thing for me because I've always travelled. I love travelling, and I think that's one thing that. I think you've
been to a few places in the world, right?
I'd like to think so, but
favourite place?
Oh, that's a hard one.
You've been to Bali, right?
Bali I've been to, but which is lovely. I don't think I've not liked anywhere. I've done South America. I think one of my most interesting trips was Japan.
For the food or just culture?
Both. Okay. Both. It was really, really interesting. It was a lot about the culture. Never thought I'd enjoy it because I've always loved going for a beach holiday, but we've always also enjoyed doing things whilst we're on holiday. So South America was another one, but going to South America as a pescatarian who doesn't
I was
going
to bring that up and say that might be quite hard, no?
Yeah, so I do eat chicken, and I call myself a little bit of a flexitarian, but South America, it wasn't hard at all. Everyone.
There's usually meat everywhere. Like,
yeah, so I would see big hunks of steak going to people's tables. I'm thinking, right,
next.
Okay, this next. But yeah, no, it wasn't tricky at all. So I actually really enjoyed it. It was a different way of cooking, and again, it was cooking open, outdoor fires, and all that stuff.
Which is such an experience in itself. Like,
yeah,
it's like there's street food, but then there's like real cultural food.
Yeah.
What's the food from? What's the Kenyan dish? What?
There's lots of.
Italy's easy.
Things.
It's pizza and pasta.
Well, there's a lot more than that.
Oh yeah,
to be
of course. Yeah.
God, there's so many things that comes to mind. It's thrown me off.
Well, I've never been to Kenya, so
there's a lot of. So there is a lot of. I think there's no one real specific dish as such, but it's the way things are cooked.
Okay.
It's a big barbecue culture, big outdoor cooking culture, which is just on a grill, nothing
well,
fancy.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it like the West, like meat and...
Yeah, so a lot of people eat meats, things like chicken curries and things like that, but not the chicken curry that you think of from a restaurant.
Yeah.
Or even... the local staples are very different. I think it's not something that I tend to cook, but eating at home versus eating out for us was very different as well.
Yeah, of course.
Because we ate a very Indian diet at home.
Well, if you're used to cooking and like starting, from scratch, and that's a massive thing in your family, like going out to eat it's not common. You'd opt for everyone to come over and eat together as opposed to going to eat out.
Yeah. So
Like there's chefs in my family and they tend to not eat out because the ability of cooking.
Well, that's what happens here now. That's what happens to me because we tend to have a lot of people over. And I do tend to love cooking because it's just it's a way of trying something new, right? But back home, because again, it was that idea of not eating meat at home. So we would go out again where my dad would be the one cooking. And he would be cooking outside. So it didn't feel like you were out in a restaurant.
Were your parents meat eaters?
So my dad eats meat, but my mum's a vegetarian.
Okay. And yours is choice that you try it like as in you wanted to be vegetarian?
So I started eating meat when I was... I eat meat now.
Yeah.
But I started eating meat probably when I was about 6 to 8 years old. I don't really think about that too much in the sense that it's just the way a lot of people do. Because I think my dad ate meat, so when we would go out, and then I must have tasted it and enjoyed it. My palate's evolved over time, and there are things that I really do enjoy and things that I don't. But it's just that love affair of how much we used to eat.
It's big portions and a lot of tasting a lot of foods, like different foods.
Yeah, it's just how much we used to eat in terms of. So when we used to go out, my dad loves cooking a crab curry or a prawn curry and things like that. We used to. I remember it's a really fun memory because it's the type of thing that I say that's what we go back to. So every time we go home, my dad will make a crab curry, or if he's there, he very rarely will tell me he's making it because he knows it's my favorite thing.
Is that your favorite dish? Yeah.
It is my favorite. It's his. It's not just anywhere. It's his one.
Okay.
And there's only been one place ever in London where I remember going to a restaurant that got somewhere close, and I remember they brought me this crab, and there was a table sitting next to us. And in Kenya, there was no bibs. There was nothing. You just
go for it.
And there was, I don't know what you call the crab cracker thing.
I'm not going to pretend.
So we didn't do that. It was just a glass.
Oh, really?
And I wouldn't be able to do it because I wasn't strong enough. So it would be my dad or my family just cracking this crab up with a glass. So I remember when I went out here in
Get an expensive bill for replacing all the glasses.
It was actually okay. It was not too bad, but obviously they gave me the cracker and a bib. I said, right, the bib's on the side. But I just remember this, and it was quite a lot of crab on the plate, so I was quite pleased about that. Because sometimes when you order something, it's a small portion.
Yeah, crab, like you have to know, like there's a lot of meat in a crab, but it's knowing where to eat it or get it.
Well, to be honest, I could eat all of it, but it's just knowing the sweetest parts of the crab. And I remember there was a table sitting there thinking, right, that's quite a lot of crab for this girl. And I'm a slow eater. I do eat very slowly. And I polished the thing off, and I think they all looked around thinking, the girl's finished it.
How has she done that?
How has she done that? But I think that's one thing, it's just always been part of me.
Yeah.
It just evokes happy memories in some ways.
And the food blog, is that something now is that your journey with it?
Yeah, for now I'm sticking with it, and it's stuff that as I go, I learn new things. I learn new things about what I am enjoying, what I'm not enjoying. I'm teaching myself new things, and whether it's to do with food or otherwise, because there's a lot of photography involved in that. There's the whole styling element.
Which is time consuming as well.
It's very time consuming. I'm hoping I am working on the blog itself. That's taken me a lot of time. But yeah, so hopefully...
There's a lot of things happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'd like to say that. There's things that I'm working on, but also as things open up here, it's that idea of I just want to enjoy this post-COVID phase as well. Not post-COVID, but post-lockdown phase.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just...
And what's the plans now, apart from enjoying? What's the future for Sona's Food Journal?
Well, I hope that it will lead to... the opportunities will come. So there have been a few opportunities that have come my way, but it's the idea that those opportunities should keep coming, and hopefully that one day it will lead to something more substantial. I'm not going to put an idea of what I'd want that to be, because it could be anything.
And just enjoy the
I just
flow
want
of
to.
it.
When that point comes, I will know that
Yeah.
that's what that's meant to be. But yeah.
Amazing. With regards going back to kind of fitness and CrossFit side, what have been your biggest achievements over the last 2.5 years?
Well, funny enough, not long after I started CrossFit, I think it was about maybe 9 months into it or something, a couple of years ago, before, just the summer before COVID happened, a friend of mine was going to do Tough Mudder, and I think someone in their group had dropped out. And so 2 weeks or just over a week before it was about to happen, she messaged me saying, do you want to come? And this friend is here now as well. She comes to CrossFit. Because she knew I'd been doing it for a while, so she sort of knew that I'd be okay to do it. And obviously she felt like she was okay to do it. So I was nervous. I thought, I'm never going to be able to do that because I have fear of heights. I've never got dirty in that way.
Yeah, it's quite a big I mean, I've done it, I think back in 2013. It's quite a big challenge.
Yeah, I remember speaking to you at that time, thinking I'm never going. And you said if it's 5K, it's going to be easy. It'll be fine. You'll be okay. Because I think by that point I'd been here for a little while.
Yeah, they had changed because they usually done. I think it was like an obstacle course, like every mile.
Yes,
or every
I don't know if there was
or something like that.
Yes,
I remember
there was quite a few obstacles in there.
Yeah, but they over the years they've got like shorter distances and bigger distances. I think I want to say like I remember doing like 8 to 10.
There was a 10K, so there were people doing another set where we were, but I think because this was the first for a lot of us, I think they'd gone.
I mean, starting realistically.
And they were doing it for a great cause at the time, but so that was one thing that I didn't think I could do it. But when I went there, it was actually okay.
You enjoyed it?
I enjoyed it. And I thought, initially I was like, oh, I'm going to have to slide myself through mud and all this. But
what month did you do it? Because I remember I'd done it in September.
Yeah, it was September as well. So it was a good sort of summer month. So it was a nice time of year to do it. But it was cold still, slide yourself through that mud. But I remember thinking, the running parts, I'm really going to struggle with that. And suddenly that became easy. And I was thinking, okay, we were jogging a little bit, but I remember trying to climb up something and thinking, I'm strong enough to do this because you climb ropes in here. And it was that, how you're...
The crossover of what you've been learning here had been taken into that.
Had really helped. And without actually thinking about it. And so that was one thing that I found, I wouldn't say easy, but it really sort of made that possible. And I mean, the other thing that I'll never forget, and I think you were here for both of them, is the first time. I've got a fear of heights. I don't.
I know the two scenarios that you're saying.
I don't do heights. Having said that, somehow I managed to climb a rope in here. And I remember the first time I touched the top, and I think you were standing down here and you said, was that the first time you touched it? And I was like, yeah. And all I could keep thinking was, I need to get back down.
It's a big height.
And I was thinking, I need to get back down this thing.
Which we hadn't taught you yet.
No, but having said that, so that was a moment. And then little things like, I think, again, it was about enjoying the process of being in here. And I mean, it wasn't for what? I remember things like skipping. I'd always skipped as a child and everything, but coming here and skipping is very, very, very different. And the idea of doing double unders, I'd given up on it. I just thought, I'm never going to be able to do this.
Which so many people get so frustrated with.
And, it's okay if it doesn't come, but you can't...
Just stop learning.
You can't stop learning. And I remember I used to stay back for just 10 minutes to just practice it and sort of, if it works, it might work. And then I was ready to give up. And you were standing outside and I just had this rope and it suddenly just happened. And I remember sort of almost feeling emotional at that point.
Well, it's a long time that you've been learning and applying.
And it was that whole idea of why I'd started, because it was to achieve those little things.
We're not always looking for like the big things, like the big lifts, or it's just, the small things.
It's the little things. I think without actually doing those little things, the big things will never come. And
correct.
I
It's
think
the foundations.
yeah, it's the foundations of it. And I think I remember feeling so happy about it. And it's actually, this rope thing it's a running story with my niece and I, who, I mean, yeah, she's the love of my life. And we always say that if you should make sure you eat your broccoli, because we have to climb a rope together. And it's just become a thing with us. And she used to, like, she's sort of grown, to her, it's so normal that me and Tom go to CrossFit. So whenever we say, oh, what are you doing? And then we say, going to CrossFit. She goes, okay, what do you do? So whenever I see her, we do squats together. She goes, look,
She
I
like
can do a
mimics the
squat.
move.
Yeah, she does it. But her dad's also very sporty as well. So,
But it's good for the development of the child.
yeah, I think it's really important because it makes it part of their norm to sort of feel, and it also builds that relationship with food and fitness for them, knowing that what you're putting in is what you're going to get out. I mean, and she's only little right now, so you can't.
But it would have a massive impact on her when she's older.
Yeah.
Like, it will sit there with her.
Yeah, so I mean, whether she decides to do CrossFit or whatever it is, it's that idea of just having a healthy relationship with what you eat to make sure you keep moving. And she loves to play tennis and things like that. So yeah, it's just making it more aware for her. So yeah, it's just been amazing.
Amazing. Sona, thank you very much for sharing your experience. Very interesting story. I hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll be back next week.